After Mayor Lloyd Winnicky decided not to run for another term, the city of Evansville will be electing a new mayor this fall. Stephanie Terry is unopposed on the Democratic ticket, so the only contested primary for the office is on the Republican side. On this election 2023 special, we'll meet the two GOP candidates running for Evansville mayor, Cheryl Musgrave and Natalie Rascher. That's next on WNIN. Welcome to this Election 2023 special featuring the Republican candidates for Evansville mayor. I'm John Gibson, WNIN News Manager and Morning Edition host on WNIN FM. We're joined by Cheryl Musgrave and Natalie Rascher, contenders on the Republican primary for Evansville mayor. The primary takes place on May 2nd, but early voting runs April 4th through May 1st. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on the show.
Glad to have you with us. Well, let's start with some questions. A very basic question from the start here for Cheryl Musgrave, who is the current Vanderburgh County Commissioner from District 3 and Republican candidate for Evansville mayor. What made you decide to run for Evansville mayor?
Well, John, I think I can make the city better. I looked around at the condition of the parks and the state of our crime in the city and realized that I have the skills and the talent to address these problems from day one. I also have a really profound sense of duty here. Evansville is a great place to live and raise a family. I know, because I did. My husband Bob and I raised two kids, and they were two very successful kids, and I think that Evansville played a huge role in that. We have a lot to offer, and I want to help make it better. You know, we just love Evansville, and we don't want to change a thing, but we really do just want to make it better.
I see. Well, what would you say are your qualifications for the mayor's position?
I do have quite a few years of experience in running government and the background to do so. Again, I'm ready from day one. Let's talk about some of that experience. I'm a chief executive of the county, along with my other two commissioners. Right. Folks refer to county commissioners as the county's mayor. So collectively, we together perform that role. I have done some transformational things for Vanderburgh County, things that have caused the county to be able to grow. Let's start with roads. I've built and planned the financing for these roads over a couple of terms in office. Everything from University Parkway to Green River Road, and Green River Road I'm talking about from Lynch all the way to State Road 57. Yeah. That's a long, long stretch.
In the county part of, yeah.
Well, some of it's in the city now.
That's true too.
They annexed
That's true
it.
Too.
Yeah, Cross Point Boulevard used to be in the county, and that's now in the city. But these are roads, and there are bridges and trails that I developed. We need that kind of leadership. Just look around the city streets, and you'll see that we have roads that need to be improved and repaired. And I've also looked for the future. My latest project has been a $40 million public-private partnership with AT&T, bringing broadband to the county. Not just any old broadband, it's state-of-the-art, and it's going to carry us into the future. Everyone in the county, in the unincorporated county, will have the opportunity at their home or at their business to have the highest speed of internet possible. This project truly is the envy of the nation. We are truly poised for the future, and I hope that we take advantage of it.
You mentioned streets and roads. What are your concerns about Evansville City streets and roads?
From the basic maintenance of them, and we all feel it as we drive around. Your suspension is not good enough to handle the potholes that we see. I'd like to see more roads paved and a better sense of where we need to keep those roads on a daily basis. A road in my neighborhood finally got paved after decades of never seeing a paver come through. That's too long to wait, and we all want to know where the roads are going to be paved next. So I'd like to have some more transparency to that. But our city needs to be a place that's attractive, that folks look at, drive through, and decide, you know what, this is absolutely fantastic here, and I want to move here.
You mentioned your experience. What are the accomplishments that you'd say you're most proud of over the years?
Oh, it's kind of hard to choose, John. I spent 10 years as Vanderburgh County Assessor, and in that role I understood and taught many others about property taxes and where those taxes come from and how they're spent and who generates them, who pays those bills. And people right here in Vanderburgh County and in the city of Evansville pay those bills. I changed that system at every level. From the time I started until the time I finished up as Governor Daniels, Commissioner of the Department of Local Government Finance, where he invited me to come and help him straighten out the property tax crisis he was dealing with. Everything about property taxes changed, and much of that was my leadership. From who's doing the assessing, it went from township assessors to county assessors.
Right.
What methods being used, the judge threw out the system I started with and put in market value, and I managed that transition. To, which is probably the greatest thing that taxpayers feel in their pocketbook, John, the property tax reform enacted by the legislature that cut 30% off everyone's property tax bill, homeowners tax bills, starting in 2008, continuing to this day. So it guaranteed you that you will know what your property tax bill is. You'll never pay more than a penny on the dollar for your assessed valuation unless you vote an increase on that. And that's a very big deal, and I'm really proud of that. But there are more accomplishments, and how much time do you have?
Well, we have a few minutes. If you have anything else you'd like to add to that.
Well, I mentioned already the broadband, and so we won't dwell on that, even though it is truly a magnificent project costing $40 million in that public-private partnership, of which taxpayers only had to contribute $9.9 million. The roads are an incredible feature of the success that we have had. Again, when you have roads that will lead to new development, that will allow you to get from work to shopping, that are in good shape, well marked, with sidewalks when you can, with trails, that's an extra bonus addition, then you have a city that's livable. When you have these things in place, then you attract the talent. And let me talk about the talent that everybody wants to attract. This is what every city and town in the country wants. They want folks from 20 to 40 with skills, already educated, to choose their town to live in.
Right.
So that's the world we're competing in, and I want Evansville to be number one in that world.
Well, let's talk a little bit about priorities. What would be your top priorities if you are elected mayor of Evansville?
My top priority will be public safety. And I recently received the FOP endorsement, the Fraternal Order of Police endorsement. Worked closely with them to understand the crime that we have now and how it's been increasing. If you have just a second, I would really like to give you some statistics on that crime, because it really is eye-opening, and it's one of the things that we have not been educated about by the media itself. And you're a member of the media, so I wanted to just take a minute. All right?
Sure, we have just a moment, and of course we can double check all that as well. But
you're more than welcome to do so. Did you know that the number of murders have tripled in the past 5 years compared to the previous 5 years? And by the way, I feel that, Bob and I feel that at our home. Last year, there were 2 murders within 1,000 feet of our home. The year before, there was 1. So this is something that I'm living every day. Alarmingly, these murders related to organized crime have tracked with the overall number of murders in the past 5 years. And there's a correlation between the murders, the violent crime, and the reduction in manpower in the police department in the organized crime division. That reduction's been 24% from 2012 to 2022. I'm going to submit to you that that's what defunding the police really looks like on the ground.
So do you plan to boost the police force, better pay, or what are your plans for the EPD?
Those are great questions. I learned in talking with our officers that the number of officers that we have now has shrunk in the past decade. Let me just give you one example within that number. The officers on patrol, We used to have 129 officers on patrol, and those are the guys that you see out in the car, the guys and the women out in the car patrolling the streets. We're down now to 107. So that's the number of officers on patrol. But on any given day, we have between 25 and 30 or more vacancies in the police department. These are funded line items where we have not been able to attract. Now, why are we having trouble attracting? The pay for the police department for the officers is too low. And I want to draw a direct comparison to the county.
Right.
Recently, the county commissioners and I voted a pay increase for the sheriff's deputies and for the confinement officers, and those are the officers who work in the jail. This is 3-year program is taking the deputies from among the lowest paid in the state to among the highest. We've inaugurated that already. That has created a disparity with the officers' pay in the city of Evansville. Their pay needs to be increased, first of all, to be competitive with the sheriff's deputies. But I already told you that the sheriff's deputies were among the lowest paid in the state.
Right.
You have to have competitive pay for these officers, or they're going to choose another location.
Sure, sure. All right, we have just a moment left here. Barring anything unforeseen, the next mayor of Evansville will be a woman. It's only taken a couple of 100 years. What are your thoughts on that milestone?
You asked me why I was running for mayor of Evansville, and I want to make sure you understand. I'm running to be the mayor of Evansville. I've been a female elected official in our county for quite a few years now. So for me, it's the work that is looking attractive to me. There are problems that I know my skill set can solve, that I have the experience to tackle, and I want to do this because now my grandchildren live here. And I want them to grow up in the Evansville that my children grew up in.
Right. Cheryl Musgrave, thank you so much for joining us. Right after this, information on early voting and locations and times, we'll meet Natalie Rascher. Again, thank you to Cheryl Musgrave. We'll be right back. Joining us now is Natalie Rascher, Republican candidate for Evansville mayor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, it's good to have you along. Can you tell us what made you decide to run for Evansville mayor?
Sure, absolutely. Well, back in 2019, I ran for city council, and it was a very close race. I actually lost by 19 votes. And so that night I actually got up on stage and I said thank you to everyone, and I said I will see you all again in 4 years. You know, at that time I thought that I would just be running for city council again. But of course, this past summer, the current mayor decided that he was not going to run for re-election, and that gave me an opportunity to take a step back and really think about, you know, what would leadership look like from the mayor's office without him being there. And so after a lot of conversations with my family and friends and supporters, I decided to make that leap.
So what do you consider your qualifications for this job?
Sure, that's a great question. One of the things that I think is unique about me is that I am bringing a lot of private sector business experience to the table. You know, I've got a load of experience in several different industries. So I've worked for Deaconess Hospital, I've been a contractor for Vectren, an adjunct faculty member at USI, and then ultimately landing my career in public accounting. And all of those skills are transferable, you know, to the mayor's office.
In terms of qualifications, you do sit on one local government board, is that right?
Sure. Well, I sit on the Alcoholic Beverage Board of Vanderburgh County and also on the Human Relations Commission currently.
Well, we talked in the previous segment about endorsements. Can you share with us some of the endorsements that you've received in this campaign?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very happy to say that Mayor Winnicky has given his full endorsement, and then also Congressman Larry Bucshon.
All right. Well, let's talk about, you mentioned most of your career has been in the private sector.
Yes.
What are some of the accomplishments that you are most proud of as you look back?
Oh, wow. I would say one of the biggest accomplishments that I've had throughout my career was at Deaconess Hospital. I was part of a task force that put together the pilot program for a medication therapy management program.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to say that that program is still in existence today, and in its pilot year, we saved the hospital close to $2 million. So we brought together physicians, pharmacists, healthcare advocates, exercise science specialists, dietitians, truly everyone, and brought them to the table to focus on a patient's care and really look at the health outcomes that they were receiving. We were able to save the hospital that much money just by bringing in all of that talent.
Now, a basic question here, and something I'm sure you can expand on. What would your priorities be if you are elected Evansville mayor?
Sure. I think the number one priority for anyone that's going to be taking this office will be public safety. Unfortunately, we have seen an increase in crime here locally. And I hate to say it, but fentanyl is becoming a problem here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we really want to make sure that our police officers have all of the training and all of the tools that they need in order to be successful at their jobs, to make sure that we're recruiting talented individuals and filling any holes there on the department.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Evansville Police, in terms of perhaps pay raises and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
or recruiting more officers, do you support those kinds of measures?
Well, sure, absolutely. So pay raises are something that we definitely need to see within our local law enforcement with the EPD.
Mm-hmm.
But one other thing that I think is important to remember when we're talking about recruiting, especially within the police department, we're looking at individuals that are millennials and Gen Z. So whenever we think about what is going to entice them to a job, the number one factor is not going to be pay or compensation. We're going to be having to shift that focus more to what they're wanting, and a lot of the times that's seeing that they're contributing to their community, making sure that they're feeling valued and that they're giving value in the job that they're doing.
Well, any other priorities you'd like to talk about? I guess you sort of touched on one there, and that would be livability, if you will.
Sure, quality of life, right?
Right.
That's something that is very important. I'm very excited that Evansville was just ranked third in the nation in terms of best city for remote workers. Both myself and my husband currently work remotely. We have the opportunity to live anywhere in the United States and still continue with our careers, but we choose to stay here in Evansville because this is home, and we have so many great things that are going on in our city.
Well, you say a lot of great things going on, but I'm sure you see some challenges as well.
Yes.
Tell us, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing Evansville, say, in the next decade?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think workforce is something that we really have to look at. And whenever we talk about workforce, talent retention is something that comes up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Whether this is in the private sector or if we're looking at City Hall specifically, we have to make sure that we have good succession planning for individuals that are leaving the workforce. And we need to make sure that we are skilling up individuals that are currently there in order to take on some of these other positions. And then we have to work with our business partners to make sure that we have the right kinds of jobs and the right kind of people in order to take those positions. We want good paying jobs here so that we all can have a good quality of life.
Do you feel that maybe some of those areas are lagging right now in Evansville?
I think there's always opportunity for improvement.
Yeah. Well, barring something unforeseen in the future, the next mayor of Evansville will be a woman. It only took a couple hundred years. Can you tell us, what you think of that milestone? Do you see that as important?
I do, and it's somewhat surreal. I talk to my kids all the time about what's going on with the mayor's race. Whenever I first decided to enter it, my son, who's 8 years old, looked at me and he, nodded his head and kind of agreed. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "But Mama, can a girl be the mayor?" Into which, my eyes got as big as a saucer, and I said, "Yes, of course a girl can be a mayor." a girl can do anything that a boy can do. And, of course, my children are 6 and 8, but that's something that I want our society and, our community to know, is that it doesn't matter what your gender is. We want to normalize quality people, quality individuals that can do the job. We want them there.
With your opponent, we spoke briefly about the street conditions in Evansville. Do you see problems there? Do you see chances for improvement in terms of road conditions?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Infrastructure, we're always going to have an opportunity to make some improvements. Specifically with roads, unfortunately with our climate, we are apt to get a lot of potholes, cracks in the sidewalks, things of those nature, or that nature. But whenever we're looking at our budget and how we're going to best tackle those problems, I think that the current administration has done a good job in getting notified of some of the issues, but our response time can always increase.
And you mentioned budgeting. Obviously, that's a big part. I mean, do you think there is more money available to put towards, say, streets and such, or the Evansville Police Department? I guess the big question becomes, where does the funding come from?
Sure, and that's a great question, and that's one that's really within my wheelhouse. Having a lot of experience in the private sector and in business, whenever we're looking at a budget, sometimes we have to massage it different ways in order to get the outcomes that we need to pay for different items, whether it's capital improvement or salary. So I think what we're going to have to do is really have a keen eye on the budget, look at those different line items, and figure out where we can find different funding sources. And that's something that I don't feel as though we've leveraged previously as much as we can now.
It sort of gets back to priorities, I guess. So are there some items perhaps that you feel could be, to use maybe a not so nice word, defunded, so that you can fund more in other areas? Do you have anything, I guess, that might be targeted for, say, reductions?
Well, I understand the question. However, I would say it's not a matter of looking at defunding, but it's finding additional funding. So something that I don't feel as though we have leveraged enough in our community is the use of foundations. So we have a Parks Foundation where in other communities, they almost supplement their entire city budget for their parks through their foundation. Those are things that we can really look toward in many different areas to make sure that we are utilizing our dollars correctly.
So using foundations, in other words, private donations and that kind of thing?
Yes, and partnerships with other private entities I think will be very helpful as well.
Yes. We talked a little bit about accomplishments that you're proud of, and of course priorities that if you are in fact elected. Any other big priorities or other issues that you'd like to look forward to?
Yeah, well, I think big projects are always something that our citizens want to know about. We're looking at a great opportunity for Roberts Park coming up here in the future. We've seen a few plans come out on what that large green space could be. I think that the next mayor should really prioritize what we do with that space, and also look at it in terms of how could we also capitalize off of that space as well. Sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money to make money, and I think the city is in a good position where we can do that. We can also shift our vision back to the riverfront to figure out ways that we can make it more friendly for the people that come and visit.
Do you have any specific plans for Roberts Park at this point?
Well, in terms of making it more accessible to individuals, and we love that wide open green space. But if it's just a field, it's a field. But if we put picnic tables and put trees out there and paths to increase the connectivity, I think we'll have a great usage.
And you mentioned Evansville's riverfront. I know there's been talk of trying to, perhaps actually where we're sitting right now, do some new development. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think that there are a lot of different ideas and plans out there. At the end of the day, I'm not an architect. As much as I envy those individuals with that creative vision, that's not in my wheelhouse. So I would say we would need to take that to a public forum where we can get a lot of different input and ideas to see what our community wants from its riverfront.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add here in the closing moments we have?
Well, I'm very excited for this opportunity to potentially become the first female mayor of Evansville. But more importantly, I'm excited to share my message and my experience with our community. As I mentioned, I'm a remote employee and I take care of all of Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada. And rather than using all of my skills over in the West Coast, I want to focus them here back in my hometown.
All right. Natalie Rascher, Republican candidate for Evansville Mayor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. And we'd like to thank you for joining us to learn more about the Republican Evansville mayoral candidates. For more election coverage, go to news.wnin.org. I'm John Gibson, WNIN News. Thanks for watching.